One. So today we have Cara Macksoud. Thank you so much for joining us today, giving us some of your time. If you could start us off and just introduce yourself with your name, role, title, all of that.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. So I'm Cara Macksoud. I run a company called Money Habitudes. Um, by title, I'm the CEO of the company, but more importantly, I'm our financial behavior specialist on staff that really not only does all of our, content production, but also makes sure how we're being integrated into financial education curriculums.
Great. And with that, just can you give us a little bit of your background? You were initially obviously pursuing something more of a traditional business finance route, and then you kind of shifted. So, can you explain some of your background for us?
Yes, absolutely. So, I had went to go work on the trading floor as a teenager. Very early on. I did go to NYU for business, but I simultaneously kept working on the exchange. And I think my thought was I would stay in trading or execution broker businesses like that. And that's where I stayed for about 15 years. Not realizing at the time, but during that time in on Wall Street and in business, what I had saw was the financial products that were being offered, different asset classes that we had really been part of the beginning of the ETF industry. But even as all these things came out and they had like, clear, let's call it recipes of how these products were built, how they function, I would see humans do things with money that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And
Mhm.
so human behavior around money really became like really just attractive to me about like why people do what they do. And if the spreadsheet or the math problem of money made this equation, you know, clear, why did people do something different than what the equation was telling them was the correct answer? And so that really became what I started pushing. I went on to have a family, which pulled me out of the business for a while. I did run a nonprofit, which it was unintentional, but the city of New York had asked us to give a stipend to unbanked kids. And I was asked to build a financial education curriculum for them because I was just the only person on staff that had the business background. And that was just a fluke, but I got to experience again just this idea of human behaviors around money.
Mhm.
And so it just kept fueling my thought process. And so in 2020, as the world started to shut down, I opted to go back to school and get a degree in behavioral finance, and then have now just pursued that side of the psychology of money and the behavioral side of money from a much more psychological standpoint than traditional business and finance.
Great. And you pretty much touched on it, but if you could just give us like a one sentence summary of what you would consider behavioral finance, that'd be great for the audience.
Behavioral finance is your feelings, your thoughts, your beliefs around money. It's not what the like two plus three may equal five. How do you feel about that five? Right? That's what the behavioral finance portion of it is.
Great. And if you had been pursuing a career in business, um, like you traditionally were working on the floor and following that route, whatever that would have looked like, is there something you might have changed if you were to stick with it?
Something I would have changed. I don't know if there's something specific other than I think there's this illusion in the world that finance people know more than everybody else, right? Like, oh, you're in finance, you must know what to invest in or how to budget and I would love to just debunk that that's not always true. I have to repeat this to people a lot. Just because you're good at making money doesn't mean you're good at managing money, though managing and making are two very different
Hmm.
skill sets. And I see people who don't make a lot but are awesome money managers, and I see people who make a ton and are terrible money managers. So I think if I would have stayed in business, I would have just been more aware that I needed to manage money a bit better because I think when you're making it, you're making it well and easy, you aren't as stringent as you need to be or strict with the management of it. You get a little loose.
Great. And so then shifting a little bit more kind of towards what your work is now. Um, what are some of the most major gaps or critical urgent gaps in financial literacy that you see? And then how is your company working to address some of those? And I know that that's all you do, so boiling it down to its essence might be a little difficult, but if you could.
Sure. So, I mean, I think the biggest problem is when we're seeing it, right? There's more and more states. I think we're up to like 28 states are now making financial education mandatory. Awesome, right? You would think this would be great. If financial education alone worked, everybody would do what they're supposed to be doing. Yet we have the highest level of consumer debt in our country than ever before. But simultaneously, we have the largest amount of financial education content being offered than ever before.
Mm,
So something is not working, right? And what we know is financial education doesn't speak to the person. Right? It's taught in rules and it's taught in do this or do that or don't do this or don't do that. And we forget that people not only do they have their own behaviors, their own fears, their own dreams, they have families, they have outer community, cultural family systems that are putting pressure on them. And so that then starts to, change what they may have gotten educated on and they can't execute on it, right? So, what did we say before? Managing and making two separate things. Executing and engaging two different things,
hmm
right? So just because I engage in financial education doesn't mean I know how to execute on it.
hmm
And so that really is where the bigger problems are. We don't give people a lot of places to practice. So there's a book out by Kahneman that talks about how our biggest things that we do in life, especially around money, there's no practice. Most people buy two homes in their lifetime. But so the first time you buy a home, that's the first time you're going through the mortgage process. That's the first time you're having to do all of this work. And
Yeah.
so how do we get good at something? By practicing,
hmm
right? You don't get a second time to retire. So if you didn't like invest properly at the right ages, you get to retirement and you don't get a do-over. So that seems to be the
Yeah.
two issues, right? There's not a lot of practice in financial acumen, and the education isn't relatable.
hmm hmm And so then what would you see as potential ways to address that? Can you like walk us through a little bit of like what you guys are doing to address some of those issues or other ones?
Yeah, so the Money Habitudes product is really put there to help people have some self-awareness and do some self-assessment around who they are with money. And the goal there is if I can have you go through the assessment and then be aware of who you are, then when you look at financial education or you look at financial products, you're more inclined, hopefully, at that point to be like, oh, that's right for me. Or that's not right for me based on my beliefs, my behaviors, my habits, because that becomes more important to get you the right products. I don't want to inundate you with information that then you don't need because now you're overwhelmed and
hmm
you
Absolutely.
are, what when people get overwhelmed, they become stuck in the mud, right? They almost have a fear of making a decision. But if I'm aware of who I am and now I can cherry pick the information that I need, learn what I need to know on the things I'm picking, now I have personalized personal finance.
hmm Yeah, absolutely. And then so then touching on that point, kind of, what would you identify as some of the potential skill sets for people our age or maybe a little older or younger, just students to begin to tailor their skill sets, tailor their understandings to be prepared for, well, at a basic level, managing their money regardless of whatever they're doing, and two, if they choose to pursue a career in business and finance, some of the skills of successful people or how they can develop those skills, I guess, as well.
Sure. I mean, the biggest thing is I always say to people, start small and be aware. Like most people have no idea what it costs them to open their eyeballs every morning. Right. And so you
Mhm.
have a roof over your head, you have shoes on your feet. Like all of these things cost things. Are you somebody that likes to eat chicken at a restaurant or are you somebody that likes to eat steak? Like even if it's your parents' money that's being spent or whatnot, be aware of what it costs you to run your life because it costs you a dollar amount to be who you like to be. Now, I'm not saying you get to always be that person, but at least now we know what we're solving to. Again, if money is a math problem, but it's not because then humans get involved and want to change the math problem. But we
Yeah.
could put everything on a spreadsheet and solve to a number. Right. And so if somebody's pursuing business and you and I were, having this conversation offline, I would try to implore them to understand what are they imploring in business. Business is a very broad topic. Are you hoping to be a VC? Are you hoping to be a trader? Are
Yeah.
you hoping to go work in corporate finance? Are you hoping to go work, in your small business? Are you looking to be an accountant? Like, what part of business do you want to be in? And then I would figure out what does it take to be successful in that trajectory? Because certain things become more important in business than other things in terms of what you may know, which classes you took, what supporting coursework you've got underneath it. And the name brand of the school may or may not have an impact depending on what you're going for. Right. In certain markets, people are looking for certain schools, and you look at the companies that are recruiting out of those schools, but we have a whole US economy. Like, there are tons of companies that are doing ridiculous work that you don't need to go to one of the best business schools in the whole
Yeah.
country. So I would say do business on yourself first before you go practice it. Like I would be more attracted to a candidate who came to me and understood the ROI on their own life. Don't tell me about your fancy spreadsheets that you can build for my company. I want to see you doing that in real life because then that means you eat what you breathe.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That absolutely makes sense. And what you said, like, how do you add the personal element to something that appears like just dry numbers because that's the reality of what it is. I mean, it's also a psychological thing as much as it is a money thing. And if only people could act according to what was logically, mathematically sound, but that's not always the case.
Right. And what did
Um,
we, when we talked about the schools before,
yeah,
right? There is certain statuses. So psychological, like it's like having a Louis Vuitton bag versus having, a generic purse that has no name brand to it, right? Certain schools and certain companies, they have a status to them because they're a name brand. And that's fun and good. But if I told you you could work for the no name brand and make more money, do you care about your own? What my buying power is, or do you care more about what others see you working for or who you're working
yeah,
for?
exactly. Yeah, because going to a state school or city school that costs you almost nothing can end up being far more economical if you know who you are at your core compared to a school take top of the line like Harvard, that you could go to and you're paying loans for pretty much decades, month after
Right.
month. And you end up in a worse situation. You might even end up at a same job or better job, but just the fact that you have to pay off that loan makes it a far more different story. And
Yep.
that's very important for people
And
to
how
recognize.
annoyed are you if your coworker went to a school that didn't cost them that much? And now you're both working. I mean, I have to tell you, that's a story I hear quite often about people who like live on the same block. And people,
Hmm.
and I'm talking about wealthier people, right? They've got a couple $1 million houses, and this is a true story. And a YouTuber, Instagrammer, I don't know, moved 2 houses down from a friend of mine who are very prominent doctors, and they were pissed. They were like, we have the best degrees. And I was like, but money's money. Like, no, like you go to Starbucks, they don't say you can't buy this coffee because you're a teacher and you're a venture capitalist. If there's a price of something, if you can pay for it, you can have it. So who stops people
Yeah,
from having different things based on your job role, your job function, the company you work for? That's made up status in people's heads.
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly true. And then kind of just to wrap up, any particular final advice you would give to kids, um, just, at our age, when to get started, maybe anything along, any final advice you have, just because it really is, um, financial literacy and behavioral finance are fields with so much to talk about, but to boil it down, um, is difficult. So, if there's any final points you wanted to add on, please
I
go
think
ahead.
the biggest thing is start. It's never too early. Like, ask the questions, find a trusted source, though, right? Like, the biggest thing is I know there's a lot on TikTok and Instagram, and it's not all bad, but it's not all good, right? And so you just have to make sure your sources, maybe get two or three sources, try to make sense of your own things, right? It's don't just run out and like invest in crypto, right? Like, understand what it is that you're learning, try to practice if you can, try to find other people that have experienced both good and bad, right? Don't confirmation bias yourself one way and only try to see the good. Listen, the biggest destroyers of wealth is the risks that we don't pay attention to, right? And so, you just want to be aware of it's all great and good when everything goes well. It's what happens when something goes bad. I really, really appreciated the way they did that movie around the GameStop trade, Dumb Money, I think it was called,
Mhm.
because I think it really could engage this younger generation. And although some of it was probably depicted as like Wall Street as a bunch of bad people, I don't know that I would so agree with that. But understand there are people out in the world that are trained and are super bright, and don't try to outsmart them because they have sizable amounts of money to push things around as well. Right. And so, like, when I hear kids come to me and they're like, oh, I'm picking this stock and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I'm all for picking a stock. And if you like something, that's great. But if you're betting your whole house on it, I'm like, why would you waste your breath or your energy trying to pick something that we have like people that are brilliant in the markets that have already put wonderful funds together that you can invest in?
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a lot of disillusionment, I guess, with people hearing certain terms that might sound appealing or wanting to get involved in things that sound very complicated because it may sound interesting or fun or whatever. But it is a reality that, there are people that have been trained to do that before you. And also, um, if you're gonna do something like that, and there are people that do that at a high school age, but you need to make sure that you truly have a sound understanding from, as you said, reliable sources, because otherwise you could find yourself in a situation where you're doing something no better than gambling.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. And that's addictive, right? Like you could start to feel you could get a trade right and just feel like, oh my God, I'm going to get everything right. And then there's that chase, right? So being aware of that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Cara
Oh,
Macksoud.
you're welcome. This was wonderful.
Thank you.